Hello, and thanks for tuning in tonight to Answers for the Paranormal on a beautiful Sunday night here on the East Coast of the United States. My name's Bill Posey, and I'm your host for the broadcast tonight. And with me over in his office in Horsham, PA, is my co-host, Joe Marodi. How you doing tonight, Joe?
Doing great, Bill. My basement office, rather than my bedroom office. I'm
okay.
Got a little bit more room. I got a little bit more room to roam down here. I've got like a U that I could go back and forth with. So, as I was talking to you guys before the show, I like to keep on the move as I walk, as we do the interview. I like to keep moving. It keeps my. It's almost like the hamster, you know. The hamster in the wheel keeps going. I think the hamster keeps going in my brain if I keep moving. So if I sit down, I lose it.
All right, brother. Well, we'll keep you running tonight. That's for sure.
Hey, speaking of weather, we had a lot of rain these last few days. A lot of rain. And you know, as we had that rain, I was thinking about all the chemtrail talk that we've been involved with our guest tonight.
Yeah.
And also on our own. And I'm thinking, you know, man, this is really weird weather. This is really weird. Because the chemtrails seem to have died down.
They have.
A bit.
Yep.
Yeah. But then we get some more information from a very reliable source.
Yeah, that was
about the chemtrails.
Yeah.
You read that?
Yeah, I did.
So, you know, I guess just the reason I'm bringing this up is that when you start talking about the things that we always talk about, the knee-jerk reaction is like, whoa, that's just too unbelievable. Why would they do that? How can you guys think that? Where's your evidence? It's the same thing with tonight.
Yeah.
It's so mind-boggling that it causes you to stop and think. It should cause you to stop and think. And I think that's really what our program is going to do tonight. It really should do. It's something to me that's been out in plain sight for over 100 years, but it's just basically been ignored. Hopefully tonight we'll just open a few more eyes. I think that's all we can ever hope to do, Bill.
That's right. With
the guests that we have on and the broadcast that we produce on our own, you just kind of keep pressing forward. And you know, there's times of discouragement. There's times of wondering if you're making a difference, but really, when it comes down to it, all you can really do is get the information out there, and it's an incumbent upon the people to take the information that they hear, research it themselves, share it with other people, talk about it. So that's what we're going to do tonight.
Yeah, that's right. Amen, brother. All right, so we are glad you're with us tonight. Again, we are Answers for the Paranormal. You can check us out on the web, www.answersfortheparanormal.org. Go to our website there and see a lot of information, a lot of good stuff. You can also access our contact page where you'll be able to get in touch with us. Click on the contact tab, and you'll see our email addresses there. Shoot us off a communication. We'd be more than glad to talk with you, answer any of your questions, or comment on anything that you might have heard us say in one of the shows and you wanted to challenge us on or commend us on. We'd be happy to hear from you. So again, www.answersfortheparanormal.org. We're also on Facebook, Answers for the Paranormal, and so we hope that you'll check us out. Well, I wanted to thank Joe for coming up with the title for our broadcast tonight, because I had about 5 or 6 of them and I didn't like any of them. So Joe came up with this one, and I think it really fits in well. So we titled the broadcast tonight, Counterfeiters in High Places: The Fed, Central Banking, and the Progressive Income Tax. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Joe, why don't you introduce our guest for tonight?
Our guest is going to be very familiar should be very familiar with our listeners. We've had her on now for, what is it, 3 times, Bill?
This is number 4.
This is number 4.
Yeah.
Her name is Tina Foster. She's an attorney. She's researched the area of doubles and imposter replacements, focusing primarily on Paul McCartney since 2008. She has examined how they are used in psychological operations by intelligence, military, and the entertainment industry. She's been a guest on numerous radio shows, including Answers for the Paranormal, which are available on the Plastic Maca Paul is Dead blog, which is plasticmaca.blogspot.com. She is also the author of The Splitting Image, Exposing the Secret World of Doubles, Decoys, and Imposter Replacement. So it's great to have Tina back again. I think that it's been 2 or 3 weeks since we've had Tina. And, I was thinking, Bill, Tina is like the 5th Beatle.
Yeah, right.
For Answers to the Paranormal. Now, the 5th Beatle, I think, who was the 5th Beatle? Was it Pete Best, or was it Brian Epstein, or was George Martin the 5th Beatle?
Yeah, people say George Martin or Brian Epstein or perhaps Stu Sutcliffe or even Billy Preston. I mean, we're not even really sure who the 5th Beatle is.
Yeah, Billy Preston played the keyboards on the rooftop concert.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't let me down, and on the song too, on the studio version.
But the 5th Beatle could also be Fall.
That's where I was going to go.
Well, I beat you to the punch. I'm sorry.
We just overlook the obvious, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think 25, 30 years in the future, people are going to look back as we become world famous, and they say, that Tina Foster, she was the 3rd Answer to the Paranormal. She was in the background. But
the 3rd wheel.
But a very important wheel. So it's great to have you back. And tonight, as well as any subsequent broadcast that we have on this subject, we're going to depend on you to bring a lot of information to our listeners. And, Bill, before we get started,
yeah.
We've had some questions from people that listen to us in the past and said, why do you guys get away from the paranormal? Why do you guys go into like conspiracy theories and stuff like that? And I always bring it back to, what? The greatest conspirator in history is not a person. It's a spiritual being, and that's the devil. But the devil works through human agents to bring about the things that he's always wanted to bring about. And he's working towards something now. So every time we do a show like this, whether our guests are in agreement with us or not, I mean, ultimately, Bill, you and I understand that it all gets back to a spiritual reality behind the physical that takes place. And there's a reason for the physical that takes place in this world.
Yep.
We're talking about extraordinary events. And the topic tonight is very extraordinary. It is so extraordinary that it has gone on for over 100 years. And, we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve System, and, you could gather that from the title and how the income tax plays into that. Before I started listening to a guy named Irv Homer back in the mid '80s, so I've been aware of this fraud for over 30 years now. I never gave a second thought as to what money was, where it came from. All I knew is that as a boy, I could go down to the store and buy baseball cards with dollar bills, and later on in life, I could go to a grocery store and use dollar bills to buy, food and goods. And I guess my point is, you can have the biggest boondoggle in history, surviving for more than a century, in plain sight. So my question would be, why do people still moan and groan about conspiracy theorists? Because you've had the greatest conspiracy all time, in my opinion, as far as an earthly conspiracy, going on for over 100 years now.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. And As we get into the questioning tonight of with Tina, you're going to see this unfold like perhaps you never have before. So let's get right into it. Tina, people hear this term a lot today, whether it's in political speeches or involving entertainment industry. But this term, the New World Order, keeps popping up in our culture today. And so right here at the outset, Tina, would you describe what the New World Order is?
Yeah, so the author H.G. Wells said it was a synonym for the establishment of a technocratic world state and of a planned economy. Carroll Quigley, another author, he wrote Tragedy and Hope, said the powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching plan to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. So this is basically the establishment of a world government, a one world government. And the Council on Foreign Relations actually published a study in 1959 that advocated for building this new international order, and it would be responsive to world aspirations for peace and for social and economic change. An international order, including states labeling themselves as socialists. So these are code words for establishing a world government. And when they say socialist, that is a synonym for communist. Mm-hmm. And that's according to Gary Allen, who wrote Men and Dare Call It Conspiracy. So to establish the New World Order, the elites, Illuminati, whatever you believe, whoever's sitting at the top, like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, those guys, they needed to destroy the sovereign nation states of the old world order, and they were going to do that by destroying the family, the nation, and race of the country, the religion, and democracy. So Jacob Schiff, who was a big banker back around the time of, he financed the overthrow of Tsar Nicholas II in Russia. So this is, 1917. And he paid $20 million at that time. And they wanted to get rid of the Tsar because Russia was the last major European country to refuse to give into the private bank scheme. Mm-hmm. And so these elites, they want to establish a totalitarian one world order and consolidate wealth and power into their own hands. And David Rockefeller said the supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. So they want to exert total control via mass surveillance and by controlling currencies. Mm-hmm. So, and James Warburg, who was the son of Paul Warburg, who was the founder of Council of Foreign Relations, he said that we shall have world government whether or not we like it. The question is only whether world government will be achieved by consent or by conquest. So a congressman named Larry P. McDonald, he talked about the Rockefellers and their role in this New World Order. He said the Rockefellers and their allies have, for at least 50 years, been carefully following a plan to use their economic power to gain political control of first America and then the rest of the world. And he said that in 1975. And he also said the drive of the Rockefellers is to create a one-world government combining super capitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. And this congressman was killed when his plane was shot down by the Soviets in 1983. So And we talked about David Rockefeller before. He admitted that he was working towards the New World Order. He wrote in his memoirs that for more than a century, ideological extremists have seized upon well-publicized incidents to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it.
Wow.
So he also said, we are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nation will accept the New World Order. So then World War II, you could say, was one of those crises. It was fomented to wear down resistance to global government. They claimed it was the only way to prevent wars, which is not true. But in 1942, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, was approved by the U.S. at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and the United Nations was approved in 1945. So, and then President Woodrow Wilson, he talked about this hidden power. He said some of the biggest men in the U.S. in the field of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. He said that in 1913. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I'm really glad that you guys are talking about this banking issue, because it's not just a U.S. problem, it's a world problem. Because although we're talking about the Federal Reserve, it's like the model for the other central banks. And then all the central banks are hooked together under the World Central Bank. So it's like we're focusing on the U.S., but you can extrapolate that out to the other central banks in whichever country you live in.
Yeah.
And there was a credit manager at the Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta, Robert H. Hemphill. He said the banking problem is the most important subject intelligent persons can investigate and reflect upon. It is so important that our present civilization may collapse unless it becomes widely understood and the defects are remedied very soon. Well, he said that in 1939, so it's probably about time we fix this thing. But yeah.
Tina, I wanted to ask you.
Yes, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Joe. About David Rockefeller's comment that he made, his quote that you brought up. We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nation will accept the NWO, or the New World Order. So, Tina, what do you think the next major crisis? I mean, you brought up World War II. Do we have like a World War III on the horizon that will bring this about? What do you think it's going to be?
Well, right now I can see that they're destabilizing Europe. So I haven't mentioned Yuri Bezmenov in this particular presentation, but I have talked about him in the past. Now, he was an ex-KGB person who he defected to the U.S., and he was on TV talking about the 4 ways to take down a nation. And if you YouTube it, it's How to Brainwash a Nation. You can come up with the whole TV show where he's talking about that. But the 4 stages were demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and then normalization. So the demoralization has been going on for many years, and he said it was pretty much complete already in the 80s. So now we're in the destabilization, moving into the crisis phase would be my assessment. So you can look at Europe. I mean, it is definitely being destabilized,
big time,
with all the migrants coming in. And is there going to be a crisis where the whole thing falls apart, where there's some major incident. Like I know we have the terrorist attacks, but like something bigger, like maybe 9/11, like that kind of level of a crisis. And then they can move in, they can normalize, and they can sell their brands of government, the totalitarian state, the police state, the new world order that they want to sell to people, that will keep you safe, and that we just have to give us all your power and all your
all your freedoms, everything, your money,
details. Yeah. So I mean, I can't tell you what the crisis is going to be, but I can feel that they're trying to move it towards that.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we talk about false flags all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a number of them occur since 9/11 in Europe as well. We've had the 7/7 London subway bombings. We've had the Nice-Paris event. We've had the Paris event. We've had the Belgium event. We've had the Ataturk airport event. These may all be precursors to something much larger looming. So it's probably going to be something that is not going to have to be thought about, a crisis on a... if you think of those false flags as tremors, the earthquake is coming. We just can't put our finger on it. But I think that when it does happen, we're going to know it. Whether it's in Europe or whether it's in the United States, we're going to know it. And I think Tina's right in this working towards this new world order. To me, the thing that stands out is the destruction of the nation states. And one of the things that Donald Trump was vilified for during this past election campaign before he was elected president, and certainly afterwards as well, it was his contention that he wanted to put America first.
Right.
And also, when you looked at elections that occurred in Paris recently, those that were running for president there, they had different party platforms, and I believe the one that won was not the one who wanted to see Paris as a strong national state, but rather would want to further the involvement in the European Union. So I think that you see globally this movement towards the lessening of a national identity towards something towards, and we had this started back in the League of Nations back in the 1920s. Was the League of Nations in the teens, Bill, or was it in the 20s? I think it was in the teens.
I think it was the late teens, yeah.
Late teens, okay. And then we had the United Nations. And now what are we going to have after the United Nations, if anything, after that? But I also want to go back to something that Rockefeller, and this is where I thought you were going, Bill, I want to talk about the mindset of these people. When Tina mentioned, she related Rockefeller's statement that the sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is preferable to the national identity or the national determination practiced in past centuries, where you had nations that were dependent upon themselves. There was always a degree to where nations depended upon certainly neighboring nations more so than a world economy. But there was also always a national identity, and I think that this statement by David Rockefeller really hits on the mindset of what I think is the Illuminati mindset, the intellectual elite. In my opinion, what his words say to me is that they are superior, and as a group, including the bankers that they control, they know what's good for you rather than you dopes.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, no, they totally think that people are stupid.
Well, I think that they think that they are more evolved, literally, as human beings. I think they're more evolved. They're more I think the fact that they believe that they are more illumined. I believe that they believe that they are more evolved as the human species. That's my opinion.
Yeah, they probably do. But they might think they're descended from Nephilim or something.
Yeah, right.
That would not surprise me. And I'll tell you what, Tina and Bill, Woodrow Wilson is a fascinating aspect in all that. We'll get into him a little bit, well, probably a lot as we go through this study in the Federal Reserve fraud. But Woodrow Wilson really sticks out as someone his attitude boggles my mind. But we'll get into that as well. And Woodrow Wilson, it sounds to me from the quotes that you have here, the quote that you have from Woodrow Wilson, that he knew something was wrong about this.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get into that a little bit further. Let's talk a little bit, Tina, about how the New World Order would be structured, because it's one thing to say New World Order and we believe that these men want this to happen. Whenever you set about to bring something into being, whether it's an architect constructing a high-rise or something like that, there has to be some structure. So how do you think the New World Order would be structured?
Okay, so this global government would consist of a world judiciary, the world court, a world executive and legislature, which would be the UN, and then a world central bank. And so that's what we're focusing on today, is just how that would be set up. So to achieve the global financial control, the elites would need to establish central bank domination of national economies worldwide. Example would be the Federal Reserve. Centralize regional economies, and examples would be the European Monetary Union and NAFTA, and then centralize the world economy under the World Central Bank. And the World Central Bank is a banking cartel composed of the Bank of International Settlements, BIS, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank. So this cartel assumed power to dictate credit policies to the banks of all nations, control the money supply of the world, and it uses fractional reserve lending. It only has to have 8% in reserve, which means that reserve requirements mean that there has to be a certain amount of funds that a depository institution must hold in reserve against specified deposit liabilities, and for the BIS, it's like 8%.
Wow.
So Carol Quigley said that this NWO system was to be controlled in a feudalistic fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by frequent meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was to be the BIS in Basel, Switzerland, the Bank of International Settlements, and which is a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. And so supposedly this BIS, it's very secretive. It's like 32 heads of central banks that meet and can basically control economies of the world. And the countries are subservient to this supranational world central bank because it has the power to decide which countries get loans and which don't, which starve. And the interest payments can actually exceed the amount of the original loan. And it serves as a mechanism for the transfer of wealth from the debtor nations to the money changers who control this world central bank. Now, just Senator Barry Goldwater, he was saying that the Trilateral Commission was intended to be the vehicle for multinational consolidation of the commercial and banking interests that would be done by seizing control of the political government of the United States. And the Trilateral Commission also represented a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power: political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so then Representative Lewis McFadden, he said that they have created a super state controlled by international bankers and international industrialists acting together to enslave the world for their own pleasure. And he said this in 1914. And he, unfortunately, was poisoned at a banquet before he could impeach the Federal Reserve members. I guess he was going to do that because they caused the Great Depression, which we'll get into later.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Poisoned, huh?
Poisoned, yeah. You see a lot of people who take on the Fed end up getting mysteriously dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up Larry McDonald. He writes about all this, and he ends up being killed in a plane that was shot down.
Right.
Now this guy, Louis McFadden, he ends up dead, being poisoned. And I guess later on we'll get into, some of the possible reasons for JFK to be eliminated. So,
right.
These guys have more power than just monetary, don't they, Tina?
Oh, yes. And they have the power of government behind them. They have the police, the power of the police behind them. So that's when you try to take on the IRS, you try to take on the federal income tax. Well, they've got government power behind them. Mm-hmm. And it's the as we'll get into later, the federal income tax is a mechanism for the taxpayers to fund the debt that the government incurs when it has basically transferred the power of the purse to this private bank. So what the Treasury is supposed to do at no cost to the taxpayer, or at least no interest, it might cost there might be some cost involved in creating money or printing money or coining money, whatever, but it doesn't charge interest to the taxpayer. So the real scam in all of this is that the Federal Reserve creates money out of thin air, and then it's charging the U.S. government interest for that, and then all the taxpayers are on the hook for that interest.
Right. And
we're really, Bill and Tina, we're really going to, tonight and the next time that we have Tina on, we're really going to look at what fiat money is and the fraud of the Federal Reserve and member banks as well, who are required by the Fed to only hold 10% in reserve. So we're gonna kind of mechanically break that down, because it's so important to understand that we're operating with money that doesn't exist. We're just operating with numbers. Yeah. When you don't have hard currency backed by hard gold or silver, then you have fiat money.
Right.
You have money as Tina said, you have money created out of thin air, and you can't have honest government. You cannot have honest government if you have dishonest money. I can't stress that any more importantly. You cannot have honest government when you have dishonest money. And this, like I said, this boondoggle has been going on for over 100 years, and we're going to really try to break this down. Let me go back a little bit here, Tina, because I think it's easy to go fast past to fast lane past some things that you said, but I think it's important to understand everything that you say tonight. When you say in Barry Goldwater's, when did Barry Goldwater run for president, Bill? Was that in 68?
64.
64, yeah.
64, okay. When he's talking about the Trilateral Commission's control over the political, monetary, and intellectual, which I would assume the intellectual would include Hollywood. Would you agree with that? Or the entertainment industry?
Sure.
I would assume, yeah.
Yeah. But here's the interesting thing to me. Over the ecclesiastical or the church,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
how does that figure into the way that they want to control and set up the New World Order?
Well, we talked about
where does the church figure? Go ahead.
Yeah, we talked about Luciferianism in the last interview, so I would suggest people go and listen to that, because they do want to have one world government, one world religion, one world central bank, one world court. I mean, so the religion part would be, the one world religion would be Luciferianism.
But what? And Bill, chime in here if you want. You have churches that exist, and we'll get more into this as well. But you have churches that exist that on the surface don't adhere to Luciferianism. That they seem to hold to a biblical doctrine. So I'm wondering how the Trilateral Commission and the New World Order, how they incorporate churches that don't necessarily adhere to Luciferianism or anything occult or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, one thing.
You know what I'm saying, Bill?
Yeah, I do. One thing that I thought of in regard to the ecclesiastical would be the way in which they've controlled it. And now, you think about something that Trump brought up during the campaign for the election in November, and he brought up having to do away with the Johnson doctrine or law that came up regarding control of the church, and
right.
So since they already have that control now, to where churches can't give out money anymore the way they used to, because they're under certain IRS rules.
Right.
So perhaps that's the control that he's talking about there, is that, thanks to Lyndon Johnson, the church is in tow because they're in bed with the state.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they already have that control. So if they're able to take over, all phases of the government, that would include the churches as well. And then it would be easy, once they did that, to do something like what Tina's saying.
Right.
Because then they would be able to destroy all those Abrahamic religions that have been set up. So, very interesting that Goldwater brought that up. Very interesting.
And let's keep in mind also the influence and the control that the church leaders, the official leaders who hold office within these Protestant and Catholic churches, the control that they have over those that they preach to every Sunday or whatever. So they are not going to go against anything that the government brings down, or any laws of the government, because they don't want to lose their 501c3 tax-exempt status.
That's
so
right.
They are, as you said, Bill, rightly, that they're going to toe the line. And I think that, and the reason I bring this up is that it's so central to the control that is going on out there, the ubiquitous control of this New World Order monster that's out there, that they have control over what were once places, houses of worship, places where people went to worship the Lord Jesus Christ in freedom, without the intrusion of state and federal government. And now that's all gone. And like you said, Bill, that Lyndon Johnson knew how to scheme to get churches to move away from their sufficiency in Jesus Christ, to move towards, we still hold to the doctrines of the Bible, but we also need the state as well to protect us.
Right.
So it's a scheme that, I'm more aware of this scheme than any of the other schemes that we may talk about. So if you apply these mechanics to the political system and the monetary system and the intellectual system, they've got it all covered. They've got it all covered.
They do.
And we can talk about it till we're blue in the face. I don't think that we're ever going to change anything, but like I said at the opening, we need to talk about this, because we need to do the right thing. We need to say what's true.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Tina. So, after looking at, as you describe what the New World Order is and how they would structure it, so how much in danger is our current republic in? I mean, are we talking the end of the United States here? Are we in danger?
Oh, definitely. So there was Senator George Malone of Nevada said that there was a preconceived plan to destroy the economic and social independence of the United States. And the United States back in the Civil War was actually, purposely, a rift was purposely caused by the banking elite in the United States. Okay, so Otto von Bismarck was a German chancellor, and he said in 1865 that the division of the United States into federations of equal force was decided long before the Civil War by the high financial powers of Europe. These bankers were afraid that the United States, if they remained in one bloc and as one nation, would attain economic and financial independence, which would upset their financial domination over the world. The voice of the Rothschilds prevailed. Therefore, they sent their emissaries into the field to exploit the question of slavery and to open an abyss between the two sections of the Union.
Wow.
And Abraham Lincoln, who was president during the Civil War, said, "I see in the near future a crisis approaching that unnerves me and causes me to tremble for the safety of my country. As a result of the war, corporations have been enthroned, and an era of corruption in high places will follow. And the money power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until all wealth is aggregated in a few hands, and the republic is destroyed. I feel at this moment more anxiety for the safety of my country than ever before, even in the midst of war."
Wow.
So another person who thought that the country was in danger was William McAdoo, who was President Wilson's campaign manager or vice chairman, and he wrote a book called The Crowded Years. He said the fact is that there is a serious danger of this country becoming a Pluto democracy. That is a sham republic with the real government in the hands of a small clique of enormously wealthy men who speak through their money, and whose influence, even today, radiates to every corner of the United States. Franklin Roosevelt, president, also wrote, "The real truth of the matter is that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government of the U.S. since the days of Andrew Jackson." And Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter said the real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise their powers from behind the scenes. And a mayor of New York City named John Hyland said the real menace to our republic is this invisible government which spreads its tentacles like a giant octopus and sprawls its slimy length over city, state, and nation. It seizes in its long and powerful tentacles our executive officers, our legislative bodies, our schools, our courts, our newspapers, and every agency created for the public protection. At the head of this octopus are the Rockefeller Standard Oil interests and a small group of powerful banking houses generally referred to as the international bankers. The little coterie of powerful international bankers virtually run the United States government for their own selfish purposes. They practically control both parties, write political platforms, make cat's paws of party leaders, use the leading men of private organizations, and resort to every device to place in nomination for high public office only such candidates as will be amenable to the dictates of corrupt big business. And Curtis Dahl, who was the son-in-law to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, wrote, "The one world government leaders and their ever-close bankers have now acquired full control of the money and credit machinery of the United States via the creation of the privately owned Federal Reserve Bank." He said that in 1970. So already then we were under their thumb.
Wow.
Mm.
Tina, I have a couple questions in regard to what you just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go back to the quote of Bill McAdoo back in 1912, and saying that the fact that there is a serious danger of this country becoming a Pluto democracy, that is a sham republic. Hasn't this already happened?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean,
that's what Curtis Dahl said had already happened in 1970. So yeah, we're past that point.
Yeah. And here's something that I heard one time, Tina, and I don't know how true it is. So I just want to pick your brain on it. And it is that, you know, we claimed independence from Great Britain back in 1776, right?
Mm-hmm.
We claimed independence from their rule, but there are some that claim that we are still under British rule. Have you ever heard about that? Or
yes.
Or what part does the British monarchy still play today in regards to this?
It's really not the British monarchy, it's the banks. It's because they rebelled against being under the National Bank of England, which again was a private bank.
Mm-hmm.
But those same people have gotten control of us again. And that happened, well, now it's very entrenched with the Federal Reserve. But, you know, we had the first Bank of the U.S., which were the same people, but that didn't really stick. And then there was a second Bank of the U.S., which again, we were able to get out from under because of Andrew Jackson. But now we're just completely under its control. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to get out from under it at this point.
Mm.
So it's not really the monarchy, it's the people above the monarchy, you know, the real rulers, the Rothschilds, those guys.
Let me ask this, Tina.
Yeah.
Let me ask this, Tina. Let me go back and refresh on a few quotes here from, as you brought up, that Abraham Lincoln said that all wealth is aggregated in a few hands. William McAdoo said it's a sham republic with the real government in the hands of a small clique of enormously wealthy men. Roosevelt, that a financial element in large centers. Frankfurter, Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, the real rulers in Washington. John Hyland, mayor of New York City, the real menace, Curtis Dahl, the one world government leaders. Now, take all of those statements. How many times have you heard the phrase shadow government? Is this the shadow government?
I would say so. Absolutely.
So what we have, basically, Bill and Tina, is you have, in each country, you have people that go to the polls and they elect senators and congressmen and mayors and governors and presidents and premiers and you name it. They elect all of these people. What does it really mean if they don't really have the power? What does it really mean? I mean, my frustration is that I'm tired of being charged with being a conspiracy theorist, because I know conspiracies take place. The Federal Reserve System, which we're just about to get into, was a result of a conspiracy.
Yeah.
I want people to think way outside the box. Get as far away from the damn box as you can, because this is the shadow government that we're talking about, folks. That when you turn on the news and you see some flunky senator or some flunky mayor making statements, they are under the control whether they know it or not. If they step out of bounds, they're going to be brought back into bounds.
Yeah.
They are under control of this shadow government within, and I would, Bill, your question was a good question about the British monarchy, and I think, Tina, your response was accurate, that the shadow government doesn't care about it doesn't care about nations. They're the cause of wars. They don't care about what nation is the most prosperous or the most powerful military. They have what they have no matter what. What nation is allegedly on top. So I think I want to, before we get into the Federal Reserve System, I think that what I want to establish is that, folks, there's a shadow government out there. You don't see them, okay? You're not going to see them before Congress. You're not going to see them before any legislative body in the world, because they pull the strings like the Wizard of Oz did in the movie without anybody seeing them. And they haven't been exposed. I mean, to the point where they're held accountable. I mean, people like us are exposing them, but what does it really accomplish? I guess my frustration is that, folks, you have government that's in plain sight, and then you have government that's shadow government. That really is, they are the power brokers.
Yeah.
Nothing happens in normal government that isn't preordained or controlled by the shadow government. Would you guys agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in some sense I do, Joe, but then, you have someone like Donald Trump, and every night, it's in my, what is going on? Why would they, if they are really in control, why would Donald Trump be the president of the United States right now?
He's like on the same level as they are, though, money-wise.
Money-wise, I understand
he's
that.
like, I kind of see that he is an opposing force to them.
Yeah.
That he's not under their control, because they control the media and they don't like him. So, I think he's like one of the few people who could take them on because of his wealth and his popularity. I mean, he's popular. He's a reality TV show guy, and I don't know. I guess time will tell, but I don't think he's under their thumb. But that's just me.
Right. And
I don't either. But I think that he was allowed to slip through for a reason, and that's a rabbit hole that I don't want to go down right now.
Right.
I believe firmly that he was allowed to slip through for a reason, for a tactical reason. These guys didn't get into the position they were to have, Donald Trump, we didn't figure on him.
Yeah, right.
No, I don't. There's no way that I believe that that's the truth. No way whatsoever.
Well, it is possible for presidents or people to take on these national bankers and be successful. I mean, look at Andrew Jackson. We'll talk about him later. But he just did a fantastic job. They tried to kill him, of course.
Yeah. But
he did kill the bank, the Second National Bank. So it can happen.
Well, we'll see. Like you said, Gina, the time will tell.
Right. See.
All right, Joe.
Here we get into the that was the when you go into a restaurant,
that's the appetizer, right?
Well, I wrote down here appetizers. How'd you know that? You're it's like
because I was thinking the same. I was thinking the same
away
thing.
From me.
I know.
That was like you sit down and they bring over. Give me some onion rings and some mozzarella sticks. Okay, those were really good mozzarella sticks and onion rings, really good. But now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes. Now we're going to order the entree. Now we're going to start talking about the Federal Reserve System. So at the very outset here, Tina, what is the Federal Reserve System? We've mentioned it over the first hour. What is the Federal Reserve System?
Okay, so it consists of privately owned it's a privately owned U.S. central bank. It's the third central bank in U.S. history. It issues fiat currency, which is called Federal Reserve notes. And as mentioned before, they charge interest on it, and it's the reason for the national debt, which is currently $20 trillion approximately. Federal Reserve System manages the U.S. monetary policy. They're supposed to maintain stable prices and achieve full employment, which is about 95%. They regulate bank holding companies and other member banks. They monitor systemic risk. And it owns the mint, the money, and sets the terms of the loan it makes to the federal treasury. The federal structure it consists of a board of governors, which are 7 board of governors. The current chair is Janet Yellen. And this board of governors supervises and regulates the operations of the Federal Reserve banks, and they are appointed by the president. And that is the only federal part of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, right.
But even though they're appointed by the president, they function independently. They do not answer to the president or Congress. There is no oversight by our government. Senator Barry Goldwater said the accounts of the Federal Reserve have never been audited. It operates outside the control of Congress and manipulates the credit of the United States. And during testimony to Congress in 2009, then Chairman Ben Bernanke refused to reveal to committee members the names of the institutions that received trillions of dollars in bailout money from the Fed. Later, he refused to disclose the identity of the foreign banks that were parties to sweetheart deals with the Federal Reserve. Representative McFadden said that projects in the USSR were built with funds unlawfully taken from the U.S. Treasury by the corrupt and dishonest Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve Bank. So he's saying that these Soviet projects, the Federal Reserve gave them money and there was no congressional approval or anything like that. Okay, so the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, is another part of the Federal Reserve System. And they make decisions about interest rates and the growth of the U.S. money supply. The members of the Board of Governors are part of the FOMC, which includes 5 of the 12 regional bank presidents, and they rotate. Then finally, there are 12 private regional Federal Reserve banks that make up the system. These banks are independent, privately owned, and locally controlled corporations. And that is not me saying it. This is a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case called Lewis v. United States from 1982. Incredible. And if anybody wants that citation, they can contact me, because that is a court saying that these are private corporations. Yeah.
Tina, would it help to audit the Federal Reserve? It's never been audited.
I think you need to abolish it. Like, don't even bother auditing it. Just get rid of it.
Well, I think the reason I asked that is that I think that's a question that pops up now and then from people like, I think Ron Paul. Ron Paul. Yeah, and people will look to, Ron Paul said he wants to audit the Federal Reserve. He must know what's going on. And I think to myself, same way that you're thinking, Tina, that, you know what, if something is corrupt, I don't want to know about it. It's like, I got involved in a conversation with someone recently about the Federal Reserve System, and I said, you know what, it's like finding out why Ted Bundy killed all those girls. Okay, fine. You want to go find out why he did that? that, knock yourself out. Go examine his brain. But he needs to be executed because he did that. If you want to find out what the Federal Reserve did and how they done it, fine, go ahead and do that. But I want him executed.
Mm-hmm.
I want him abolished. So I just wanted to get that out in the open. Everybody out there says, all we need to do is audit the Fed, and then we'll find out what's really good. No, just get rid of that creature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really has. I don't see how it has any legitimacy for what it's doing. The government basically just handed over its treasury, the duties the treasury should be performing.
Right.
The government just handed it over. I mean, you could say the Federal Reserve usurped that power, but it was given to them. So, but the government needs to take it back. The people need to take it back, and we can get into that later too. That's some solutions, and some states are trying to take it on too. But just don't even bother with the expense of an audit. It would give it some legitimacy maybe if you audit it, like it's a legitimate thing, which in my opinion it's not. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like operates with no oversight, and they resist any type of oversight Congress tries to implement. They just do not want any control taken over. They don't want to have their meetings public, nothing. Like, these people are not accountable to us or the government. They just do whatever they want. And we're really at their mercy. Like, I mean, I trade on the stock market, and every time the Fed is going to have a meeting, everyone is just on pins and needles. What are they going to announce? Are they going to raise interest rates or not? And it's like, you know what? Why do they have the power over the economy like that? And we can talk about how they control the economy too, with their ability to inflate or deflate the money supply. And they've created bubbles. They created the Great Depression, and we will talk about that. So these people have just enormous power, and they have power over our government, and they just need to be gone. That's my opinion. But and people are like, what are you going to replace it with? Well, we will talk about that.
Yeah, well, we will definitely talk about that. But before we do that, Tina, let's talk about how the Federal Reserve came about. What is the history of the Federal Reserve? How did we get to the point where we have this privately owned banking cartel controlling the monetary system of the United States?
Okay, so before the Federal Reserve System was enacted in 1913, there was a period from late 1800s to about 1910 where things were just going great economy, booming economy. There was no central bank. Corporations were financing growth from their own profits. They didn't have to take out loans, and they were becoming independent of the big banks. So the banks didn't like that. In 1910, several of the world's leading bankers met at Jekyll Island to bring back a privately owned central bank. And they wanted to consolidate the power to issue and regulate the nation's money into their hands, into the hands of the private bankers. So this was the making of the Federal Reserve. And they wanted to make it the only entity that could legally introduce U.S. paper currency into circulation. And some of the people that were at Jekyll Island, I mean, this was like the Rockefellers, Warburg, Rothschild, representatives. There's like 6 of them, and it was very secret. They only used their first names. They didn't want people to know what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so then, so the first attempt was the Aldrich Plan, but the act that actually got through was the Glass-Owen Act, and it's basically just establishing the Federal Reserve.
Right.
But it was snuck through Congress on December 22nd, 1913, so right before Christmas. Many senators had already left for the holidays. They were told that nothing would be done on the bill until after they returned, but there was a vote anyway, and at least 27 senators were gone, and that's probably why it passed. So pretty hinky there. And Representative Charles Lindbergh Sr., the father of the famous aviator, he was he was a big opponent of the Federal Reserve. He said, "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president signs this bill, the invisible government by monetary power will be legalized. The worst legislative crime of the ages is perpetrated by this banking bill." And in my personal opinion is that Charles Lindbergh, the baby being kidnapped, the grandson, I think that was directed at Charles Lindbergh Sr., the opponent to the Federal Reserve.
No doubt.
And not so much at the aviator, just taking out some, revenge against him for not playing ball.
Yep.
But
before you go any further on that, Tina, I had wanted to ask you about that. If you thought that there was a connection between the kidnapping and the murder of the Lindbergh baby in 1932, which was subsequently pinned on, I think, a patsy named Bruno Hauptmann. And the reason I want to emphasize that is that, we talked about who was the first guy that we talked about in the plane crash, Larry McDonald, and then who was the other guy that was...
McFadden, he was another opponent. Yeah. He was poisoned,
The extraordinary means that these people will go to protect their secrets and to protect their well-being. They're in this game for real. They don't play with fake weapons. They really, if you cross them, you're going to pay for it one way or another.
Definitely.
So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tina.
Oh, okay. So anyway, we were talking about the establishment of the Fed, and President Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, he signed this bill into law, but only a few years later, 1916, he already regretted it. He wrote, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the world. No longer a government of free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of small groups of dominant men." Incredible. So, whether this Federal Reserve System has even done what it was supposed to do is debatable. Milton Friedman, who is a Nobel Prize-winning economist, he was talking about how actually that the Fed has done a pretty bad job of keeping the money or keeping the economy stable. He said the stock of money, prices, and output was decidedly more unstable after the establishment of the Federal Reserve System than before. The most dramatic period of instability in output was the period between the two world wars, which includes the severe monetary contractions of 1920 to 21, 1929 to 33, 1937 to 38. No other 20-year period in American history contains as many as 3 such severe contractions. So if they're saying the Federal Reserve has done anything good for the economy, our economy was better without it.
Yeah.
When we had no central bank, we didn't have 20 years where there were 3 major, he says contractions, but that could be like depressions or recessions. So they're not even really doing anything good.
No.
Let me ask this, Tina, and Bill again, please chime in. The men who gathered at Jekyll Island, there were 7 of them. They had to know that, and before I get into that, you were just mentioning that it's debatable whether the Fed is good or not, and that there are opinions pro and con. And to me, it doesn't matter whether the Fed was proved to be good for the nation or bad for the nation. To me, it all goes back to what the Constitution says.
Mm-hmm.
So my concerns, one of my major concerns at the very outset would have been, if I was alive at that time, those who gathered at Jekyll Island, they had to know that what they were proposing was blatantly unconstitutional, because the Constitution clearly states that Congress shall coin and regulate money.
Right.
And as you said, Tina, there's no oversight. There's no federal involvement other than the president appointing the head of the Fed. We go back to Alan Greenspan recently, and Ben Bernanke, and now Janet Yellen. I'm not sure whether the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve are appointed federally or not. I'm not sure about that.
The 7 board members are, yes, by the president.
They're appointed.
Mm-hmm.
They're appointed by the president as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Jekyll Island conspirators, and that's what they were, because as you said, Tina, they gathered in secrecy. They didn't use their first names. I mean, people can go back and research this. That there's a wealth of information on the actual event itself. And then you have the congressmen who voted in favor of the Glass-Owen Act, the Federal Reserve Act. They had to know that this was blatantly unconstitutional as well. So we're aware of the arguments against this legislation. Are we aware of the arguments that were present at the time against this legislation? And did those arguments acknowledge the pink elephant in Congress, that what you were about to do was usurp the Constitution? So, Tina, are you aware of any arguments that were presented at that time that would have stated the clear argument that you're about to hand over the monetary system to a private system where the Constitution says that we are supposed to coin and regulate the money?
Yeah, and I agree with you that the Constitution only allows Congress to coin money, gold and silver, but unfortunately, in the legal tender cases, gave the U.S. government broad power to print fiat currency. So the greenbacks that Lincoln issued were considered constitutional. I don't personally agree, but you know what? I'm not the Supreme Court, so...
but greenbacks were printed by Congress, correct?
Yes, by the Treasury, absolutely.
By the Treasury,
I'll talk
right.
about that, too, because that's really important. So what happened...
Hold on, the coin and regulate. So they were regulating greenbacks, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's...
Greenbacks were backed by gold and or silver, correct?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't. I'd have to double check on that, but I do not think they were backed by gold at that point. They were considered legal tender, or you could pay your taxes with them, of course, but I don't think they were backed by gold and silver.
Okay. Well, the bottom line to me is that at least that they were regulated by Congress.
Sure. Treasury.
Yeah, by the Treasury, right.
Mm-hmm.
Not by a private organization like the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes... To me, at the very outset, there should have been a hue and a cry from Congress or from the congressional constituents against this Glass-Owen Federal Reserve Act, because it should have been the red flag should have gone up. No, you can't give private and a private entity the right. You can call it legal tender if you want. That just makes it lawful. That doesn't make it constitutional.
Well, don't forget they snuck this thing right before Christmas, so 27 senators were gone. You know, they did that on purpose. They probably knew they wouldn't have the votes for it if they just did it normally.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay, so those that were present for the vote, they ignored the Constitution.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or they were, threatened, or they were bribed, or blackmailed, or, or convinced. I mean, I suppose it's possible somebody believes in this thing, but, people like Nelson Aldrich had originally been against the Fed, and then suddenly he was for it. So,
Yeah, Nelson Aldrich, he was the Republican whip in the Senate at that time. He was the chairman of the National Monetary Commission. The National Monetary Commission was formed to reform banking because there were public concerns about banking at that time. There were runs on the bank where money, could not be paid back to the lenders. And so people were concerned with financial power concentrated within a small group of bankers that were known as the Money Trust. And Nelson Aldrich was the head of that commission to reform banking. And Nelson Aldrich was a phony because if you understand what he did and how politics works, he was sent out by this group of the seven or the seven, including Aldrich himself, who wanted to pass the Glass-Owens Act. Aldrich was sent out prior to the vote to gain support, public support, for the passage of that act. But it was done in a nefarious way. He went out, like you said, Tina. You said he was against it. I don't believe that he was against it. I believe
originally, and then he was for it.
Yeah, but wait a minute. I think that was a con. I believe he was for it all along. I believe that he was sent out as a political representative against the Federal Reserve, knowing that people had an inherent distrust of government. So when this guy, Nelson Aldrich, goes out and says, "Oh, this is a bad idea," people start thinking it's a good idea. Mm-hmm. So this was part of the con. This was part of the con in passing the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Mm-hmm. So this is how devious these people are.
Yeah.
Controlled opposition.
Yeah. Another thing I thought of too, Tina, was that, Wilson could have vetoed this bill very easily.
Well, he was in because of these people, though. They wanted him, and he was their man. So it wasn't until 3 years later that he, expressed his regret for having signed it. So he was probably just their puppet,
Yeah.
So yeah, he could have vetoed it when it came to his desk, but he was still in their pocket at that point.
Right. And that's
so
that's what I wanted to get to.
I mentioned Wilson a little bit earlier, and I wanted to talk a little bit about him. Did he all of a sudden become wise in 1916 when he was?
I guess upon reflection, like, what did I do? Oh my God! But too late.
Yeah. Right.
I have to wonder whether he was. You say he was their guy, Tina. I have to wonder whether he was threatened somehow. Was he under duress? I don't think he all of a sudden became wise 3 years later.
No.
But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, maybe.
My opinion.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
And that tactic of, when most of the senators are gone and all of a sudden you have a vote, they use that even today, don't they? I mean, you hear about...
Are you thinking of a particular instance, or...?
Well, I'm thinking of some of the recent votes that they've had regarding health care and other things. They've waited for the time when recess would come up and then, and then put a vote through, so...
Right.
I mean, there's so many things that go on behind the scenes that that we just have no clue on, that have an effect on our lives every day. And I watched a YouTube just last night of Barack Obama, and he begins this World Summit speech by saying, "Our Constitution begins with we the people." And what a joke! It's so far not we the people, I mean, come on, Barack. Even you couldn't sell that one.
And he's supposedly a constitutional professor.
Exactly.
No, I'm sorry. He was never a professor. He never published one law review article. I have more published papers than he does. There's no way. I'm sorry. I just don't buy that. And actually...
That's why all his records are sealed.
Right. I mean, his birth certificate isn't even legitimate. It was proven to be a forgery.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get very much press. But anyway... No. Don't get me started.
Before we move on, Tina, something very, very interesting that stands out to me here that you said about corporations. This is prior to the Federal Reserve Act, when there was no central bank.
Okay.
When you said that corporations were financing growth from profits and not loans,
right,
and they were becoming independent of big banks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that this was part of the motivation for those that eventually formed the Federal Reserve, that corporations are making it without us? We need to do something about this.
Yeah, absolutely I do. They don't want to lose control. We haven't really talked about the fractional reserve lending yet. But that is how these people make their money.
Sure.
They have to lend. So what happens is that a bank only has to have like 10% on reserve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which means that for every dollar it has, it can loan out 10, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and they can charge interest on it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're lending out money they don't have, and they're charging interest. I mean, it's the biggest scam.
It is.
And if this were any other business, they would be in jail for fraud.
Exactly. That is so
But they
true.
get away with it. So if people are not taking out loans, they're not making money.
That's right.
And
if they don't increase debt, they're in trouble.
Right. So if they're losing control, losing power, losing money, I mean, I definitely think that was a motivating factor. But, the big banks, they never stopped wanting to have a central bank. So Andrew Jackson, he killed the bank for like 70 years. I mean, he put a pretty good nail or stake through his heart. But they never gave up wanting to be back in control as a central bank. So... maybe that was just one of the motivating factors that, hey, this economy is really going well and the corporations are getting independent of us. Or maybe it could have just been, well, they never gave up their dreams anyway, so.
Let's talk about this, how banks work a little bit. Because I think that most people are like me, Bill and Tina. I don't know how you guys are, but when it comes to banking, when it comes to finances, when it comes to understanding how things work, I really have to think through things. And when I hear things for the first time, it doesn't quite register, and I have to think about it. And then if I still don't have every I dotted and T crossed, I still got to think about it. When you're talking about, Tina, that banks, member banks of the Federal Reserve System, only have to have 10% in reserve, and they can loan out up to 100%. How would I would pose this question to people? How would you like to start a business where you're a bank, and I deposit $10 in the Tina Foster bank, but Tina Foster can lend out $90.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Is my brain working right?
Yeah.
That $90 doesn't exist.
Mm-mm.
And then you can collect interest on that $90. But where is the hard currency?
Well, there is none at this point.
There is none. That's what fiat money is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned in an earlier interview, the only thing that exists at this point that comes close to hard currency is the nickel.
Yeah.
Its face value is 5 cents. Its current metal value is 3 cents. If you look at any of the other coins, their face value is much higher than their metal value. But if you look at the old penny, like 1982 and before, its face value is 1 cent, but its metal value is 1.7 cents.
Because the metal value cannot be manipulated.
Right, its copper content is worth a certain amount on the open market, and right now a penny is worth almost twice its face value. Well, not quite, 75% or something, but
this is why the dollar is traded at different rates, correct? This is why the dollar goes up and the dollar goes down, but the price of gold and the price of silver and precious metals, they remain relatively stable over any given period of time. Is that right?
Okay. Yeah. So what happened was we had a gold standard with Bretton Woods in 1942. The U.S. dollar was pegged to gold. Gold was going to be $35 an ounce. And the other countries that were part of that Bretton Woods agreement pegged their currencies to the U.S. dollar. Okay, so then in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard, which means that the U.S. dollar is free-floating. It's not pegged to anything, and all the other currencies are free-floating too because they're pegged to the U.S. dollar, which is not pegged to anything. Mm-hmm. So they're all free-floating against each other. Now, the price of gold, gold and silver are just, substances. They don't change. Like, their value doesn't change over time. But their dollar price certainly does, because the way the banks do fractional reserve lending, it inflates the money supply. As we said, they create $9 for every $1 they get. So that's inflating the money supply. So all those dollars that go out into the world, they work to drive up the prices of commodities and goods and things like that. So gold its value is fixed, but its dollar price is not. So currently, it's at about $1,228 an ounce. Mm-hmm. Was $35 an ounce in 42 with Bretton Woods, and now it's $1,228. Gold, its purchasing power has remained pretty much the same over time. I saw a study where the price of Yale tuition has remained about the same. Let me see if I can find that real quick.
Sure.
It was... Okay, yeah. So the price of Yale tuition in gold has... In 1932, the cost was $1,000.56 for a year. In 2015, the cost was $62,200 a year. But the true cost measured in gold was the same, around 1,600 grams, about average for the 115-year period. So if you're paying for Yale tuition, you just need about 1,600 grams of gold.
Wow.
The dollar price could totally change, but... And then other studies were copper has stayed about the same from 2010. Let's see here. From 1936 to 2010, price of copper was about the same, but because of the U.S. dollar being destroyed through inflation, it took 30 times as many dollars in 2010 to buy a pound of copper as it did in 1936. And then crude oil, too, was 2 grams of gold. Yeah, crude oil at 2 grams of gold was about the same in 2010 as it was in the early 1950s. But if you measure the price in US dollars, you would get the impression that it was about 30 times more expensive. So I guess if you just have 2 grams of gold, you could buy a barrel of oil. So anyway, yeah, purchasing power remains about the same for gold and silver. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it does, and I want to expound on this further. Bill, okay? Is that okay?
Sure.
And we've got, what, about 25 minutes left?
Yeah, about that.
I remember as I we're talking about the stable value of precious metals versus the fluctuating value of the dollar, of paper currency. I remember, as I mentioned earlier in the program, listening to a radio personality. I would say, Bill, agree or disagree with me. The last radio personality in the Philadelphia market who actually told the truth and didn't care about the ramifications, Irv Homer.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him talking about the Federal Reserve System and talking about precious metals, and how he used an example back then of he could take $21,000 worth of gold coins, and go into a local dealership and buy a Porsche that was valued at about $250,000 at the time. They would take the $21,000 of gold coins and give you the Porsche. So what does that tell you about what real money is?
Well, yeah.
And let me just make some statements here, and then to get your response to it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Inflation. When we talk about inflation, what the cause of inflation is, what it really is, here's a statement that was made by an individual. Inflation is not prices going up. It's the value of the dollar going down. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, was that Milton Friedman?
No, that was G. Edward Griffin.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Well, Milton Friedman says that inflation is more money in the system. So each dollar has less value. So yes, that would be an accurate statement.
Yeah, it's more money in the system as the result of creating more and more and more Federal Reserve notes means the prices of goods fluctuate drastically.
They go up.
Yeah.
More dollars. You need more dollars. The more dollars chase the product. So yeah, prices go up. It's
and real money, backed by that which cannot be created, such as gold or silver. The purchasing power of that money remains constant over a long period of time, such as gold and silver. Correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that money created goes out into the economy and dilutes down existing dollars.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is from someone who has a GED, and I'm constantly amazed that I turn on these financial programs on cable TV, and I hear these talking heads talking about prices of things and trading and talking about the Fed. None of them ever talks about the fraud of the Fed. Now, what is your opinion on that, Tina? What is it about the Federal Reserve System's control over telecommunications that none of the people? I mean, I've been watching. You know, I'm 56 years old. I've been watching TV long enough. I've never heard anybody on these financial shows ever saying a disparaging word against the Federal Reserve System?
Well, I think we know who owns the media. I mean, all the elites, the banker. I mean, these are the people who own the media. So I think I did see that Glenn Beck had done a show about the Federal Reserve, and then he was fired shortly thereafter. So, you know, you can watch it on YouTube. It's worth watching. It's maybe half an hour. Yeah, you know, I don't even know if the talking heads necessarily understand how the Federal Reserve works. You know, at a deeper level. I mean, they probably know, like, oh, the president appoints the board of governors, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the real nuts and bolts of it, the under the surface. I mean, how they manipulate using the fluctuating money supply. They can cause depressions. They know, you know, they can put money into the system and they can take it out again. And they can cause depressions. So, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me ask this as well, Tina. Do you feel comfortable talking? What is the prime lending rate? Do you know what the prime lending rate is?
They just raised it a quarter point recently. I just have to look that up real quick. Do you know what it is?
Well, the prime lending rate is the interest rate that banks charge one another for loans.
Oh, I thought you meant what is the current.
Oh, no, not what is the current moment. No.
Okay.
Am I correct in saying what I said?
Yeah.
And how does the Federal Reserve control, when you think about what the prime lending rate is, what the prime lending rate is when banks charge each other for overnight loans? Mm-hmm. How does that control the economy? Like, what does it mean when the Fed, when the economy is too robust and the Fed is worrying about inflation?
Well,
how does the Fed figure into that?
Yeah, well, they'll raise the interest rate then to make credit less available,
right,
which has a deflationary effect. See, they want 2% inflation every year, though. Right. And just think about how 2% every year, that your dollar is losing 2% every year. That adds up.
Sure does.
So already from 2002 to 2010, it's lost like 75% of its purchasing power. So it took $1 to buy something in 2002. Now it takes $4. Mm-hmm. And that's just going to keep going.
Yeah, for the current system to work, it has to do that.
It does, yeah, because here's the thing, like when we were talking about fractional reserve lending, every dollar that goes out represents $1 of debt plus interest. So there's not enough money in the system to pay the national debt. Mm-hmm. So they have to keep making more money.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It's pretty crazy. And that's why a lot of people think that there's ultimately going to be a hyperinflationary collapse.
Right. It has to crumble on itself.
In Weimar, Germany, in Argentina, in Zimbabwe. I mean, it's crazy how these currencies collapsed. I mean, it was... Let me just find the price of gold for you in Weimar, Germany. Okay, so hyperinflation in Weimar, Germany was just out of control. So in January 1919, 1 ounce of gold traded for 170 marks. By November 1923, that same ounce of gold was worth 87 trillion marks.
Wow.
An entire city block of prime real estate in downtown Berlin was purchased for 1 ounce of gold.
Unbelievable.
It is absolutely incredible. So that's what can happen with fiat currencies, and it's happened to every single fiat currency in the past. And people think it's not going to happen to the U.S. Federal Reserve note. We'll see. I mean, I hope it doesn't, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Let me ask this then, Tina.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is set on the U.S. dollar in world monetary system, right?
Yeah.
So, if there was something to come down where the dollar collapsed completely, what would it take for these banks to be able to keep the money train going? In other words, how would they be able to create a new monetary paradigm? How would they do that?
It seems like they want to switch to the SDR, the special drawing rights. There's talk of that. Now, one thing that has probably kept the dollar from collapsing is the petrodollar. So it is, in a way, backed by oil because oil has to trade in dollars. Saddam Hussein wanted to start trading oil in euros.
Right.
And that was probably why they decided to take him out. And Gaddafi wanted to have a gold dinar.
Right.
And then they wanted to take him out, of course, because they really can't have anything that would compete with the U.S. Federal Reserve note. Later I can talk about Lincoln and Kennedy, JFK. He implemented the silver certificate, which was in direct competition with the Federal Reserve note. So that's probably why they took him out. Really, the only way is to keep the printing presses going, and because if they cause a severe depression, I mean, people aren't going to be happy about that. It's almost easier politically to just keep the printing presses going and just letting the hyperinflation it's just politically it's a very difficult situation to be in. It's almost impossible, this system, to keep it going indefinitely. Now it's slow. It's a slow collapse right now. The prices are going up slowly, so it's almost like boiling frogs, Yeah. And people freak out, like, "Oh, I used to buy a Coke for 5 cents, and now it's like, whatever, $1.50." And then it'll be $2, it'll be $5, and then it'll be like, it just happens slow enough to where people aren't freaking out and taking to the streets.
Right. And the Bible talks about, a day's wages for a loaf of bread, for bread. So, at what point do we come to that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes left, though.
Yeah.
Tina, let me ask you a question before we close. We have so much more to get into. So we're gonna take this past tonight, obviously, to a couple more broadcasts with Tina. So those listening tonight, if you're even at the very least intrigued by what you're hearing tonight, please check back with us at Answers for the Paranormal for when we will have Tina back with us. She has graciously agreed to commit to at least a couple more interviews with us, or Tina's website as well, which she'll give the information for at the end of the program. But before we close, I want to ask Tina a final question for me for tonight. A question which maybe Tina will change her answer over the course of these next several weeks or months, however. And we've agreed, Bill, secretly that we are going to destroy Tina's social life with these interviews. So it's really we have her under our control. Again, she's the fifth beetle of this program, so she's in for the long haul. So we can continue on with this for as long as we please, I suppose, unless we're arrested at some point. So who knows? But Tina, let me ask you this question before we close, in all sincerity. do you see a time for a vehicle which may be set in place where there is, at some point, a one world currency, beyond the dollar, where you can go anywhere and spend the dollar, but you can also spend the local currency as well. Do you see it coming to a point where, perhaps electronically, where there's no physical currency, maybe electronically, where it is the only acceptable currency? When we're talking about the New World Order, do you see the New World Order financially having a system in place where they have their currency and you can't use rubles, you can't use any other form of currency? It's just their currency.
Yeah, Aaron Russo talked about that, actually. So he directed From Freedom to Fascism, and he said he was friends with Nelson Rockefeller, I believe, who told him that the plan was to have an all-digital currency, and they would be able to turn it off if the people misbehaved. So they'd have total control over your bank account. So, whether that ends up being like something like Bitcoin, or I don't know if the SDRs would ever be like a currency for the people or not, but maybe. It wouldn't surprise me if they try to go all digital. They're definitely trying to get rid of cash.
Mm-hmm.
They want you to use your credit card at least, or your debit, so they can track everything. And but of course that also inflates the money supply. So does cash, I guess. Cash and credit cards inflate money. But of course, digital, I mean, what is that? Like, that doesn't even exist, like, as anything. But most of the money supply is digital. Only 3% exists as cash or coins. That's mostly just numbers on a screen. So,
I think that was probably the point of my question, is that we're already very close to accomplishing that at this point, where most of the financial exchanges are done digitally, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, not being a financial guy, I mean, I just, to me, it boggles my mind that people go along with this, but they have. So I think that you're correct in saying that we are coming to a point where it's going to be totally digital. And I think that when you said what you said, Tina, I literally got a chill down my arms. I don't know if Bill did. When you said that if you misbehave, it'll be shut off.
Yeah. Total control.
Yep.
So I think that's where we're heading, and but I think that what we've done tonight in the first 2 hours of this is that we've kind of laid the groundwork for what is as bad a picture as we've painted. Where we've been since 1913, I believe it's going to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's some stuff to go back over to get people more grounded in where we've been over the last 100 plus years as we begin the next program. But the information tonight, I think, was invaluable, and I really thank you, Tina, for your for the time that you spent in research on this. I know that you didn't just start doing this yesterday.
Mm-mm.
And there have been many other people who have tried to get this word out, and my congratulations to them as well. So we do what we can, I think, during these periods that we have able to broadcast. And again, as I said at the outset of the program, it's incumbent upon the people to listen to what Tina said tonight, to what we've said tonight, and to go look at it for yourself. And, are we going to overthrow the world? This is my opinion. I don't believe that we will. but that there's a burden on my heart, and I know there's a burden on Bill's heart to get the truth out as to the schemes we believe ultimately can trace back to the devil and how he's working through this New World Order system. So, Tina, you've brought some invaluable information to us tonight, and as I said a couple minutes ago, check back to www.answersfortheparanormal.com to see when we're going to have Tina back. So we're going to work that out. Because this is a subject that you can't just really bang out in 2 hours. So we're gonna see where this goes from here. Probably another 2 or 3 broadcasts.
Right. Hey guys, before we go tonight, I've had this discussion with others as well. Joe, you brought up that you have. Regarding a new world order, or this NWO, and there's people that tell me all the time, you're crazy. They don't exist, or it'll never happen.
Right.
Well, folks, you have to go and you have to do the research, and you really have to look into this. One place that I would suggest that you start is right here: www.worldgovernmentsummit.org. And the next one is coming up 11 to 13 February of 2018 in Dubai. They have it there every year. And you'll see on that website what we're talking about tonight, how all these governments get together and they plan and scheme on how they're going to bring about this new world order. So this is something that's not going away. And
right.
Tina, I want to echo what Joe said and just thank you so much for all this information. I was just blown away by what you presented tonight and what you're going to present in the next couple broadcasts that we do. So, this is only the beginning of what we're going to bring out in these broadcasts. So, again, Tina, thank you. And
you're welcome.
Joe, thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thank you as well. And Tina, why don't you give out your contact information, how people can get a hold of you?
Okay, sure. So my blog is plasticmaca.blogspot.com. My book is The Splitting Image, Exposing the Secret World of Doubles, Decoys, and Imposter Replacements. And that's available on Amazon. And people can find me on Facebook. I encourage that, Tina Foster. And feel free to message me or email me. My email is on my blog. So, it'd be great to hear from people.
Yeah.
Can I say one more thing, Bill?
Yeah, go ahead.
Before Tina goes, this is such a heavy subject. Whatever we have Tina on, obviously, it's very, very intense stuff. I got to kind of relax a little bit. I'm serious. I got a kick out of one of the comments in our third interview with Tina that had about 26,000 views on YouTube. One of the commenters commented on Tina's voice. Okay. I got a kick out of it. Okay. Tina was very flattered by it. But I thought to myself, hey, wait a second. Like, where are the women out there saying, hey, Bill, you got a nice voice. Joe, you got a nice voice. Nobody said anything about our voice. What about us,
Yeah, well.
How about some compliments about how we sound? I understand it. Tina sounds very nice. She really does. But, us guys like to have some compliments every now and then as well. So just throwing that out there,
Hint, hint.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, I'm glad you brought some lighthearted to the end of this, because you're right. It has been some heavy material tonight, and
yeah.
Tina, we really do want to again thank you, and we look forward to having you back next week if we can get it all set up. So,
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, great. So you have a great night, Tina, and
Yeah.
we'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, you too.
right, God
Until
bless.
next
See you,
time.
Tina.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Joe, you there?
I'm here, Bill.
All right, great. Well, I'll tell you, Joe, that was a lot of fun for me, because this is a subject that, you know, I've tried to approach with a lot of people at a lot of different times and have always gotten resistance. And just to be with you and Tina tonight for a couple hours, like-minded and having concern over, you know, what's going on. You know, it's really been a pleasure for me.
Well, Bill, I can understand that you've encountered resistance. I think that I've probably mentioned on a previous broadcast that I remember there was I think it was a Christmas at my in-laws where we somehow the subject of money came up, and I started talking about the dollar bill and all the occult symbols on it, and the fact that it's really counterfeit money according to the Constitution. The Federal Reserve is legalized, and that's why we titled the program "Counterfeit in High Places," counterfeiters in high places, because, you know, the fact that they're legal doesn't mean that they're right. That doesn't mean that they're constitutional. So, a couple of people got up and stormed out on that family function because I said the Federal Reserve System was corrupt and it was fiat currency and it was counterfeit. And so I know where you're coming from, Bill, because it's amazing. I think that really it's a shock to people's systems that it's almost like saying you're stupid. Why don't you know this?
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's certainly not the intention of what we've done here tonight, to accuse people of being stupid. If anything, I would say, please pay more attention. Please pay more attention. Listen to what we're saying and consider it.
Yeah.
The fact that the Federal Reserve System has been in effect and the dollar has been in circulation for over 100 years, and Tina talked about not even 10 years, in 1913, the last recession was what? Was 29 to 33?
Mm-hmm.
So 15, 20 years. 20 years after the Federal Reserve System came into effect, you already had three, and Tina referred to them as contractions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking to myself, like, nobody had a baby. You know, these were depressions.
Yep.
They can call them contractions if they want. They were depressions. You know, the 1929 stock market crash was a result of the fiat currency being in circulation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so this is an issue where there's a lot of stuff in plain sight. You know, take a look at the back of a dollar bill. If you want to ignore the all-seeing eye above the pyramid
Mm-hmm.
and the Latin phrases announcing the order of new ages,
Mm-hmm.
You want to ignore all that stuff, then that's just being willfully ignorant. You have to understand who these people are and why they do what they do. And
Yep.
I think as a result of tonight, Bill, the overarching theme of this is that there's a new world order that is in place. And, you know, I didn't come up with that term.
No.
George H.W. Bush was, as far as I know, the first one who said new world order in public as a public figure. Others
Mm-hmm.
may have said it before him. But he said it clearly.
Yeah.
That there was a new world order in place. He was announcing a new world order. So you can call them us conspiracy theorists, but it doesn't hold up to history, because others have used it before us, and others who are in a position to bring about the New World Order. We were talking about some of the people who were at Jekyll Island, a creation of the Federal Reserve. But over time, there have been minor players who have kept the game going.
Right.
And the Bushes certainly were a family that kept the game going.
And continue to keep the game going.
And continue to keep the game going. If people don't believe the Bushes knew that 9/11 was coming, then I got some swampland in Florida to sell you, because the Bushes are as involved as any political family, any family dynasty in the last half century or so, going back to their George H.W. Bush's father, Prescott Bush.
Right.
So, keep up with us on this, folks, and see when we're going to have Tina back for this continued discussion. It's too critical, because if we can have the overall theme correct, but we can have like certain areas that are the information is wrong, and we always are welcome. We always welcome people who will contact us and say, you know what, you guys got this wrong, you got that wrong. Here's the real story, and we'll check it out, and we'll correct ourselves as need be. But overall, I think that I'm convinced that we're presenting information that's out there in the public domain for public scrutiny to come to your own conclusions.
Yep.
The problem is, Bill, as we've said many times in the past, is that people won't take the time to actually do that, because it takes time away from life, and we understand that.
Yep.
The time that we take to prepare for these programs, the time that Tina took to prepare for the previous 3 interviews and the interview tonight are just time out of our lives, and we wouldn't have it any other way. But our challenge to you is, we've taken the time to present this information to you, and the least you can do is go check out what we've said. Get others involved. Maybe people that haven't listened to tonight's broadcast that you've listened to. Bankers, you listen to tonight's program. Hey, Charlie, come here a minute. I heard a program about the Federal Reserve System. What do you think about this? You're not going to see that on cable television, Bill.
No.
You're not going to see that in the mainstream media. You're not going to see the Federal Reserve disparaged in any way, shape, or form. I don't care if it's Fox News, anything. Because they know where their bread and butter is.
That's right.
So I'm really looking forward to having Tina back next weekend, and probably the weekend after that. I think that I joke about ruining Tina's social life, but we can keep Tina going with topics for, fill in the blank, Bill.
Yep, for sure. One more thing, Joe, before we go. The scriptures talk about this one world organization and a one world system of religion as well. And just a couple of scripture passages that talk about these. The book of Daniel that describes the kingdoms. Daniel 7, Daniel 11, and 12. Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 to 18, and Revelation 17, 1 to 13. And, take some time and look those scriptures up and read them. And, you're looking at prophecy that's unfolding right before us in our time.
That's right.
And as you stated many times, Joe, it's all pointing to one event that's coming down eventually, and that's the reign of Antichrist. That's
right.
Who is behind what will take place, and behind the Antichrist is Satan himself, who is conspiring to bring all this about. And folks, it's why in this time where your eternity is going to be decided is of paramount importance. And it's one of the things that Joe and I talk about in our broadcasts, and that is where you are in relationship to Jesus Christ. And the Bible talks about our state of where mankind is because of their sin. And that sin started 6,000 years ago in the garden, when Adam and the woman disobeyed God, and they fell into sin. And because of that, they were separated from God. And everyone who is born of Adam is also separated from God because of their sin. But God has provided a way for that sin to be paid, and He did that in the person and in the work of Jesus Christ upon the cross. And Christ willingly went to the cross to die the death that we all deserve. He paid the price for sin. God's Word says that Christ upon the cross, when He cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" At that moment, He took upon Himself the sin of the whole world throughout all of time. And God's Word also tells us that in exchange for that sin that Christ took, He offers to us by faith His righteousness. And so that when you place your faith in Jesus Christ, your eternal security is it says that it's written in the Lamb's Book of Life before the foundation of the world. And God knows from the very beginning of creation who would come to Him in faith. So if you've never come to the place in your life where you've seen your sin as that separates you from a holy God, then won't you consider tonight that upon crying out to God in faith to forgive you of your sin, this is what repentance is. He will do that, and He would send His Spirit, His Holy Spirit, into your heart as a deposit that guarantees your inheritance, which is heaven. So,
Amen.
It's something that that Joe and I have done in the past. We know that, according to the Scriptures, that that our salvation is secure in Christ. The Bible tells us that we've already been seated with Christ in the heavenly realms because we've placed our faith in Him.
Mm-hmm.
So, folks, if you wanted to know more about salvation and what that means, then contact us, Joe at answersfortheparanormal.org or William at answersfortheparanormal.org, and we'd be happy to tell you what it means to become born again by faith.
Amen.
So until next week, when we have our guest Tina Foster back on again to talk about this Fed central banking and progressive income tax, the New World Order, and these counterfeiters that are in high places. Check us out on the web. We'll give you the time and the date when we'll broadcast again. So, Joe, thanks again for tonight. I look forward to next week.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Bill, and thank Tina for her preparation and the time that she spent with us over these last several weeks. It's really a blessing to us to have the opportunity to have so many different individuals from so many different walks of life agree to come on with us and spend a couple of hours with us, or in Tina's case, many hours with us, to bring out things that subjects and topics that just bottom line, Bill, there's people avoid for various reasons. There are areas of discussion that are very difficult to enter into.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you go around the water cooler, the discussion usually begins around frivolous things like sports and entertainment, and sometimes it goes into politics. But the areas that we go into are areas that really require thought and contemplation and consideration, because they are really the central issues of life. And I think that's the whole basis of our ministry, Bill, is and as you so well described the gospel, this is what we have done since the Lord established this ministry back in 2010. And as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, very outset of the broadcast, what all these things have to do with the paranormal is that the devil has schemes that are so intricate, and so sometimes they're hidden, sometimes they're out in the open, but nevertheless they're all intended to counterfeit. They're all intended to counterfeit the original blueprint of the will of God for mankind, which is to honor Him, to serve Him, and to enjoy fellowship with Him. And as you said, Bill, because of our sin that was broken, and because of Christ, it was reestablished. We've been redeemed and restored because of the broken body and shed blood of Christ. But Satan, in all of his deceptive works, counterfeits everything that the Lord does. So it's our intention always to present the information that we bring to you in the light of the gospel, in the light of the scriptures, not just to expose evil, not just to highlight the work of the devil, but to say, here is the work of the devil, here are the schemes of the devil, here are the counterfeit works of the devil, such as the Federal Reserve System, the counterfeit works of the devil in the promise of alien salvation, the promise of carrying on in some ethereal realm somewhere as a ghost, as we've produced many broadcasts on the deceptions of UFOs and ghosts. So we've highlighted the fact that the devil is a counterfeiter and a schemer and a deceiver. We've not left it at that. We've always said, here is the answer to that. The answer is always Jesus Christ, who is the Good Shepherd. So it is our hope tonight as we end this broadcast that you will indeed hear the voice of the Good Shepherd, who has given his life as a ransom for many. He came to save sinners. He came to give eternal life. And as he said in John chapter 10, everyone who came before him is a robber and a thief. You try to enter through another gate, it's a phony, fake, fraud gate. He is the gate. He is the one. He is the way and the truth and the life. And, you know, in talking about counterfeiters, Bill, it's interesting to note that the devil will also counterfeit miracles. He'll perform miracles to a point, those things which defy the physical laws of the universe. But, you know, he can't bring back the dead. He can't open the eyes of the blind. He can't make the lame to walk. Right. He can't do those sorts of things, legitimate miracles. All he can do is counterfeit miracles, like have books fly off the shelves, have things levitate, you know, parlor tricks in the spiritual realm. Jesus told the Jews in John 10, if you don't want to believe me that I say that I'm the Son of God, okay, believe the miracles. Demons can't raise the dead. They can't give sight to the blind. Satan can't do those sorts of miracles. So Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, and his earthly life was verified in the miracles that he performed. So a lot of it, Bill, what we've been discussing is counterfeiting of the original. You know, in the context of the Federal Reserve System, you know, the Constitution states that Congress shall coin and regulate money. Well, the Federal Reserve System came along and counterfeited that system. Jesus said there's one way and one truth and one life to it. One way and one truth and one life, and he is that way. And the devil has come along and counterfeited that way. So I think that what we've done is try to present over these last 7/8 years is that there are deceptions out there. You have to watch for them. You have to be aware of them. And when you're aware of them, you have to point them out. And I think that's what we tried to do over these last 7 or 8 years. And that's what we're going to continue to do.
Amen. Well, thanks for listening, folks, to Answers for the Paranormal. For Joe, this is Bill, and hope you have a great rest of the night, and we'll catch you again next week. So good night, brother, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, brother. Thanks. Good night to all.